yellow, that color, that's our power of strength, that's right here in our solar plexus area. There's blue, our power of power, that's our throat right here, the power of our word. We have orange, and orange left this right here. It's our power of, it's not called the power of creativity, but it is our center of creativity. Anyway, any time that I wear this, I will think of Babette, and I will think of our 12 powers. And here is my beautiful platform that I love so much.
You can try the mic again. Carolyn, you can try the mic again. See if it works.
Is this good?
It's turned up. It's not.
Is that good? Okay. Does this work for you?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
It's been a moment.
Okay. So, as you all remember, well, you know what, before I start my talk, I'm going to tell you why I wasn't here last month. It was a really short notice thing, and whoever stepped in, I say thank you, thank you, thank you. The night before I was to come, we were out to dinner, and my husband had had a serious fall and had ended up in the ER and was in a back brace and everything. And we left a restaurant that night, and he stepped off a curb and fell again. And so he spent the night in the ER. I know that we were not going to be home very early, and I didn't know what was happening. So I called Carolyn and I said, I am so sorry. My husband is healing, as Bob said this morning. It's a long process, but he's got a great attitude. Then on Sunday morning, I opened up my texts and I received a text from my brother-in-law that my sister had passed. So it was just sort of this rocky time, and it's been a rocky month. But I will tell you, when I get in that place, one of the things that I think about are you and this sanctuary. This is such a place of peace, isn't it?
Yes.
And Shiloh, the decorating you do, I've just been looking at the Breathe banner this morning. It's gorgeous. So thank you for the beauty that you create here. During this past year, actually beginning last January, we have been talking about the 12 powers. And as you know, I think the 12 powers are such an integral, and they are actually my favorite part of unity. I think when we know the powers and when we use the powers, that they are so grounding and so empowering to let us be the highest and best selves that we can possibly be. Because each of these powers are something that we are inherently endowed with. We all come into the world with our 12 powers. But we're often so unaware of that. And even if we are in a time where, and even good unity truth students can feel like a victim sometimes, and then we catch ourselves and we remember, no, that is not true. And we use our power of will, that spiritual power of will, that brings us back onto course. And that is the power that we're talking about this morning, our power of will. A new ice cream store opened up in my community, like way too close. And Jim and I are doing a lot of fun things these days, so we go for an awful lot of ice cream. And I will tell you, I keep looking at myself and saying, there must be other fun things to do. But hey, let's go for ice cream. It's called Handles, and it was started in 1945. I don't know how wide in the North State it is, but at least it's somewhat big in Sacramento. And the other day we were at Handles, and there was an adorable little girl. She was maybe 18 months old, and she was just beginning to feel so independent, and her dad would put her down, and she'd travel around, and he'd pick her up, and she'd scream, and you know how toddlers arch like this, and she'd arch, and then she'd scream some more, and you know, this dad couldn't stand it, so he'd put her back down, and then it played again and again. And I was thinking about how this little girl, this precious little being, was exercising her power of will, her human power of will, and how important that is in the developmental phases, both of toddlerhood, which can be seen as somewhat cute, and adolescence, which nobody ever And yet, in these phases, if we didn't use our human power of will, we wouldn't quite go through the steps of individuation, of separating from our parents, of separating from that which is familiar. But there is a different kind of will, and that's our spiritual power of will. And it's our power to choose, to decide, to command, to lead, and to determine. It is located right here in the center of our head, right next to understanding. And when we use it effectively, Charles Fillmore, our co-founder, says that it is our CEO. And the reason that it's called our CEO, according to Charles, is that will leads all the other powers. If we did not have will, we could use our power of insight, but so what? We could use our imagination, or we could bring down those wonderful ideas that are always there waiting for us. But without our power of will, nothing would happen to them. They would just stay ideas. It is our power of will that leads us. Charles says in the 12 Powers of Man, will moves to action all the other faculties of mind. Without will, there would be no action. And you know, every time I think about the power of will or speak about the power of will, I think about that. I think about, isn't that interesting that it's our power of will that's our CEO. It's our leader. It says, yes, this is the road to take right now. And when we use it appropriately, we bring others on that path with us. Have you ever known somebody who used their power of will? They were charismatic, they were charming, they had great ideas. And if you did not agree to follow, it was his way, her way, or the highway. That was that person's overdeveloped power of will. There could be that same energetic, dynamic, charismatic, idea-filled person that used his or her will to bring you along with them in a sense of cooperation. And that is the person we want to follow. That is the person where we know we have a role in their action plan, whatever it might be. The other end of will is a person who he or she may be a doormat, or they may be always the person who says, well, I don't care, you decide, they're all good ideas. This person has an undeveloped sense of will. We have to know that it is our right. We have been given the birthright to choose, to go where we want to go. Our idea of saying yes or no is as strong in our life as anybody else's idea. We are God's offspring. We have all of those powers, all of those attributes of God living right here in us. And it's our opportunity to develop them. So people will say, well, that can't be true. We're not God. Well, we are manifestations of God right here on earth. We are not God in that we have not developed to the full capacity. Those God qualities are right here living within us. And when we use our power of will to make right choices, to take the right steps, we become more and more Christ-like in every word that we say, in every thought that we think, and in every step that we take. Each of the 12 powers has an apostle that represents them, one of Jesus' 12 apostles. And the apostle that is connected with will is Matthew. Matthew was a tax collector. He was a Jewish person who had been recruited by the Romans to collect taxes. And he had two strikes against him in his Jewish community. First of all, tax collectors were hated. Tax collectors tended to collect more than the estimated tax and then pocket for their own good. Also, Jewish people who worked for the Romans were hated. It was felt by their Jewish community that they had betrayed the community by doing something for the Romans. So here was Matthew, a tax collector that collected far more share tax than was the estimated tax. He was pocketing part of it. He was hated by his own community. And my guess is that the more he was hated, the more powerful he tried to be by getting rich, by being a big man as a tax collector. And it wasn't working very well. And Jesus, who was walking along the road that day in Capernaum, a village by the sea, where Matthew had his table set up, recognized this man who wanted to be powerful, who acted as if he were powerful, and really was probably not very powerful at all. And Jesus said, Matthew, Levi, which was his Jewish name, come, follow me. Listen to the story. It is in Matthew chapter 5, verse 27. After this, he, Jesus, went and saw a tax collector named Levi sitting in the tax booth and said to him, follow me. And he, Matthew, got up, left everything, and followed him. Then Levi gave a great banquet for him in his house, him meaning Jesus. And there was a large crowd of tax collectors and others sitting at the table with them. The Pharisees and their scribes were complaining to his disciples, saying, why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and with sinners? Jesus answered, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick I have come to call, not to the righteous, but sinners to repentance. Beautiful, isn't it? Jesus knew that Levi, Matthew, had something far more within him than he was living up to. And can you imagine the courage that it took for Levi to follow Jesus? He had to give up a lot. He had to give up his personal sense of power. He had to give up whatever wealth he had accrued. And he had to leave his community, even if he was not well liked, because his community was his home. When we train our will so that we follow a higher power, we recognize it is not a one-time thing. It is something we do again and again. And isn't this part of the spiritual path when we're really honest with ourselves? We never get quite there. We get there, and then this inner voice, this God says, hey, look, there's another step you can take. And so we take that step and we practice over and over again. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but we are always moving forward. And as our will guides us to move forward, we give up something. Maybe you don't even know what it is. But in retrospect, we know that we have given something. I moved to Sacramento just over a year ago, and it was the perfect move. We moved because my husband's health was beginning to decline. And when I think back what's happened over this past year, there was a voice inside that was saying, Carolyn, now is the time. And if we had waited until this year, it would have been so much more difficult. So I garnered my power of will and I resigned the job at Unity Church in Reading as senior minister, which I loved. I gave up my church community. I left my community of friends of 25 years, and we made a move. And it has been perfect. It has been. We always make new friends. We can fall in love with a new home. And we find new churches. You have heard people say in times of trial and tribulation, well, this must just be God's will. This is just plain stinking thinking. God has one will for us, and that will is for our highest good, for our joy, for our peace, for our love. That is God's will. And if we think that there's a God out there, and you know, as good Unity True students as we are, sometimes it's really easy to say, please help me, as if there were a God out there. When really we're doing is we're praying to that inner God who is inside and outside. Please help me, inner self, inner higher self, inner Christ self, to remember the steps to take. We are led toward happiness. I'm rereading Eric Butterworth's book right now, The Universe is Calling. It's a magnificent book. I love the book. I've probably read it 3 or 4 times. And he said, if we believe that there is a God who is going to come in and save us, it's like playing dice with the universe. What we do is we open that door in our chest that Charlie read to us about in Ruby this morning, and we let the universe flow into us, and we listen to our inner voice, that voice that is saying, now is the time, or no, stop, wait, there's plenty of other time. And we listen, and we use our will, our wise CEO, and we follow. So to use our spiritual will, we let go and let God. And that's another phrase that can be easily misunderstood. It's like, well, is that just giving up? No, it's not giving up. Eric Butterworth says it is just becoming quiet. I know if I have to let go of something, I always create a little ritual. I might write it down and burn it, or I might visualize it being on the wing of a bird and the bird flying away. There are many things I do to let go. But you know, Eric is right. All we have to do is settle in and be quiet. And in those just instances, when that inner voice stops and we're sitting as one with ourselves and our inner God, something happens. And whatever we've been holding on to just is let go in that moment. We don't have to do anything except be do I know though whether I'm hearing my spiritual will or my human will? Because sometimes there's a fine line, isn't there? We have what we think is a good idea and we want to follow that idea. And we may get a glimpse that there's a higher way to follow that idea, but we're so clear on the path. Sometimes we take steps and we're a little bit down the path before we recognize, there was a different way. So there are some clues when we're listening and we're hearing our God's will as opposed to our personal will. Our God voice, that voice of spirit, is always clear. We are left with no doubt. I may have told you this story before. I had been very active in my church in Reading, and I had taken over when our minister was on sabbatical, and then she very suddenly resigned, and I was invited to take her place. But it was an interim thing, and our church opened up for a ministerial search. And although I wasn't on the committee because I was the acting minister, people talk. I knew the kind of candidates, very fine people, very good people. But all of a sudden I began thinking, you know what? I know this congregation. They know me. I know Unity Church in Reading. Maybe I'll put my name in a hat. Oh no, I'm not licensed yet. I'm not ordained yet. I'm not going to put my name in the hat. I was back and forth and back and forth. And one night, this voice, clearer than day and louder than loud, said, Carolyn, stop fighting your destiny. I would have never denied that voice. That voice had spoken to me twice before in my life, loud, but so clear. You know the story. I became the minister of Unity Church in Reading. I became licensed and ordained. It was a voice I could not refute because it was clear. It was pure. If you hear a voice and it's so muddled, you can rest with assurance that that is not the God voice. Because the God voice is never muddled. If it feels just a little bit off to you, just sit and wait. It's a message that there's something greater, something different. Because God's voice is pure and clear. It is not muddled and off. Spirit's voice is peaceful and gentle. It could be loud like mine, but it is peaceful and gentle. So if the voice you're hearing is demanding and pushing, it's not your God voice, your higher power voice. Because we know the voice is pure and clear. We know that there's no muddledness, and we know that it's not demanding. And when you hear a voice that is clear and pure and gentle, if you follow it, it is not a mistake. Doesn't mean there won't be some bumps in the road. It doesn't mean that the path doesn't sometimes have some curves, but you can rest assured, just like I can rest assured, that it is a clear, pure. And so as we re-educate ourselves to listen in a different way with that open door in our chest to God's will, which is no more or no less than that will that lives inside of us, our inner God. And when we use our power of strength that rests right here to take the path that we are being led on, and when we use our inner voice, that talking voice where we talk to ourselves, and when we use our voice where we talk to others, as a kind and empowered but gentle CEO, we are not only living to our highest and best, but we are adding to a world that works for all with peace and with joy and with love. So together, this week and this next month before, it's only 3 weeks before I see you again. Let's practice being our own kind and gentle CEO. And let's listen to that God voice. And when it takes us on a path that we think, oh my gosh, this couldn't possibly be me, trust it, because it is you. It is your highest and best self. I honor you. I support you as you take your paths. And like Paula said, I love you too. Have a great week, month.
Thank you, Carolyn. What a wonderful joy it is to have you part of our